Hello and welcome to Pensions in 10 with me, David Brooks, and my colleague Marc Devereux. This week we look at net zero, we review what happened after the spring statement, and the Pensions Regulator has been out and about. Okay, Marc, our first story this week, we're going to look at a sort of a rumbling topic that's flying around the Houses of Commons. So Kemi Badenoch has been talking about net zero targets and whether this is even possible by 2050. But you've been watching this with interest, so just fill us in on what's going on.
Yeah, this is interesting, Dave. So within the last week or so, Kemi Badenoch made a speech, which I did pick up on, regarding net zero. And in summary, she thinks it's nigh on impossible to get to net zero by 2050 without incurring material costs, which I think she described as potentially bankrupting the country. And I suppose that's in tune with other things we're hearing overseas. So most notably, I suppose the US has pulled back under Trump, unsurprisingly, on some of its commitments as well. What's quite interesting about this story is it appears that Kemi Badenoch didn't consult with the independent climate change committee, which was set up to advise the government on its path to net zero. This is after Theresa May effectively enshrined our commitments into law when she was Prime Minister. So off the back of that, there was a podcast, a really quite interesting podcast, which was organised by a group called Clean Up, and it was a discussion between Baroness Worthington and Emma Pinchbeck. And Emma Pinchbeck is the recently new CEO of this climate change committee, and it was quite illuminating in that there are many different factors, I think, to consider in this path to net zero. One of them, of course, is related to climate, but there are other really important factors here, and some of the ones that she cited were things like energy security. She had a pretty challenging time during 2022 when gas supplies were disrupted because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So case in point that where we're reliant on gas coming from overseas, things can and do go wrong from time to time. So security of energy is clearly a good strategic priority, one would think, but also the economic benefits. Just shifting to renewable energy over time is likely to benefit households in the UK. I think some numbers she put on those benefits were of the order of £1,400 a year for a typical household who's running an electric car and running an electric heat pump as opposed to fossil fuels driving those. So that's a material sort of benefit, I suppose, in terms of economics, but also just in terms of how industry has responded through innovation. So way back when, I don't think that committee saw that offshore wind would be a particularly big player in our renewable market, but innovation has been such that it's really taken hold over the last several years, and it is a big contributor. So I think from their perspective, and they're advising the government and monitoring progress on its journey to net zero, they feel it's eminently achievable, and it's a cost-effective way to get there. So this story isn't done by any stretch, but I picked up on it because I thought it was odd, and it's clearly topical for many trustees who are thinking about these things, but also investing in the types of renewable energy investments that we need to deliver on this path.
Okay, in the past week, we also had the spring statement from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And Marc, this is your job now, just to talk me down from any sort of panic, because I'm so used to, ever since 2022, I can't watch a sort of a fiscal event without watching the 15-year gilt yield and what it's doing. And usually it's you and our chief actuary, David Hamilton, that have got to talk me down from panicking about everything that's going on. So can you just give us a summary on how the markets have reacted to the spring statement?
Yeah, I pretty muted, Dave, I think is how I describe it. Yeah, it was a statement with little in the way of new news. I think we were we knew what to expect, didn't we, in terms of fiscal headroom disappearing and how it might be got back. And sure enough, the potential savings on the welfare bill were front and centre of that. But in terms of market reaction, not very much at all, Dave. I think what is quite interesting to me is if you just take a step back and look at our current base rate, let's say, and look at government borrowing costs. The UK has some of the highest costs amongst the developed world, which has been the case for a while, and that's clearly costly in terms of servicing that debt. We know that, and that ultimately is working against the growth agenda. So I think we're pretty much as we were on that front.
Thank you.
So Dave, the regulator's been out and about over the course of the last week, making various speeches. What have they been talking about?
Yeah, so they bookended last week. So David Wormsley was talking at the PASA conference on Monday, and his speech majored on data and administration and the way the regulator wants to see improvements in data and really getting the data and administration ready for the digital age. I feel like we are in the digital age, so administration always feels like a bit of a whipping boy as being a bit behind the curve. But the regulator obviously is aware the dashboards are coming online. They want to make sure that pension schemes are in a position to connect. There was a scary stat that 1 in 4 schemes hold data in non-digital format that might be needed for the dashboard. So that's obviously a challenge for the regulator in the industry to resolve in very quick order. But he was talking through their regulatory focus, which is their digital data strategy. They published, I think it was earlier on this year, if not later last year. And so the importance of holding data digitally, using that properly, and being a driver for efficiencies and better outcomes for savers. So that was a really important touch point from David there. But then Nautica Delphas, the CEO, was also talking on Friday at the Natalie titled JP Morgan symposium on pensions or something, and there was a very interesting sort of speech from Nautica there, covering a number of different areas, and I won't be able to cover them all in the time I've got here, but in particular she focused on the productive finance drive again. So that's a very familiar topic to anyone who's been keeping an eye on pensions for the last few years, and some very, I would say, warm noises from the regulator that they're looking to be positioned in a way to support schemes looking to allocate assets towards productive finance. And here I'm thinking probably more defined contribution pension schemes rather than DB schemes, but they're definitely not exclusively DC. Definitely DB will be part of that conversation. And so this is already something we've seen in train from some providers talking up productive finance, and now the regulator is being in a position now saying that they're going to work with industry to create an environment where trustees will get more comfortable investing in productive finance. Whatever that actually means, it's still very little definition of what we're actually talking about. But there are some funny paragraphs in the well, there was a speech and a letter, so there's some paragraphs that can be sort of taken one of two ways. There's a bit of nuance in there whether I think the regulator does accept that for some schemes and some members this won't be the right thing for them, but there's definitely a warm step in the direction towards making this happen for the government and making the government's policy aims a reality. I don't know if you've got views, Mark, on that sort of direction of travel.
I think the devil will be in the detail, Dave. Let's see what comes before us. But I suppose I'm slightly sceptical about the move to force or encourage schemes into the area of productive finance. I think there's a lot to think about, and ultimately, if you're thinking about the end member outcomes, these things need to be done well, not rushed. They need to be properly thought through. So I'll keep a watching brief on things, but slightly skeptical still.
Okay, that's it for this week. So it just leaves me to thank Mark for joining me as my guest host this time. So thank you, Mark, for popping along, and we'll see you on the next episode of Pensions in Tech.